What's the craziest thing your psycho ex did after the breakup? He stole my prescription medication and refused to return it unless I agreed to get back together with him. I told my older brother, who intervened and convinced him to stop. The harassment escalated quickly after that. He targeted me at work for over an hour, knowing I was alone. He called my cell repeatedly until I blocked his number, then switched to the workplace phone. He threatened to cause a scene and get me fired once a manager arrived if I didn't answer. I couldn't block the calls, and ignoring them only made the computer log each one as missed. After about 30 calls, I started picking up and hanging up immediately, desperate to feel some sense of control, too scared to call the police. Once again, my older brother had to step in to make him stop. The threats continued. He said he would harm himself if I didn't get back together with him. When I asked if he was serious, he said he was. Finally, I found the courage to call the police. They took him to the hospital, where he stayed for 3 hours. The staff determined it was a panic attack and released him, but the harassment resumed almost immediately. All of this unfolded within a single day. His obsession soon extended to my friends. He sent hundreds of messages, lying to them in the middle of the night and dragging them into his chaos. He threatened me directly, saying, "If I ever see you with anyone else, you won't be so pretty anymore, and the guy will regret talking to you." He slandered me relentlessly, calling me names on social media. When I told my grandmother, she stepped in and made him remove the posts. Once, he found out I had made a Tinder account. He borrowed a friend's phone to call me and screamed at me, calling me a wuss. He also punched a hole in his wall or maybe cut himself. The details were unclear, but his manipulation and volatility were terrifying. Even in the midst of it all, I felt completely powerless and trapped. One night, he told me he was coming to my house, fully aware of my dad's work schedule and that I would be home alone. Fortunately, I happened to be staying at a friend's place that night, but I still had to call him and demand that he leave me alone. A few days later, he tried again, this time knowing for certain that I was by myself. He insisted we talk, saying he would do whatever it took to get back together. Remembering his past behavior, I had my worst panic attack yet, struggling to breathe. I told him over and over that I didn't want to see him, that we were not getting back together, but he ignored me and kept coming toward my house. I jumped in my car and drove away, eventually parking at a grocery store, shaking and terrified he would find me. I called my mom for support and later that day went to the police station to secure a temporary restraining order. The court process was exhausting. Despite his admitted behavior clearly meeting the definition of domestic abuse, the judge ruled that I didn't qualify for a permanent restraining order because there had been no physical violence. In essence, the decision implied he would have to hit me before I could protect myself. Just 3 days after court, he found new ways to reach me, creating fake Facebook accounts and messaging me on every platform imaginable. Each time I discovered a new message, the sense of dread returned, but I blocked him and kept trying to move forward. Story 2. She had extreme mood swings that made life unpredictable. One moment I was the most important person in the world. The next, she was shouting and throwing things. The chaos kept me constantly on edge because I never knew what would set her off. After our first real date, we met again at a party. She came home with me that night. Nothing physical happened, but she said she felt safe and didn't want to leave. She ended up staying for 8 days straight, and honestly, I didn't mind. Those were the good times, when everything still felt new and exciting. Within a month, she was hardly going back to her own place. She lived with her mom, who could be harsh, and since we were both in college, my place became her escape. People sometimes ask why I stayed even when things started going downhill. The truth is, I was completely drawn to her. She was stunning. She'd even done some modeling, and she carried herself with a kind of confidence that was magnetic. I always thought of myself as average at best, but with her, I felt like I'd somehow scored way above my league. In the beginning, the chemistry between us was intense. Everything felt exciting and passionate, and I was convinced that kind of connection meant we were meant to be. Looking back, I realize I mistook that intensity for love. We would do it an average of 15 times a week, usually once a day during the week, and on weekends, we would only leave the bed to pay the pizza delivery man. We even had the cops called once. Our walls were thin, a cheap neighborhood because she screamed so loud the neighbor thought someone was being attacked. Now for the bad part. When things weren't amazing, they were absolutely awful. She drank almost every night and would become suspicious or angry over the smallest things. If I said something the wrong way, she'd get upset. If I laughed at the wrong moment, she'd get upset again. There were countless times she lashed out physically, hitting, kicking, or throwing things. Thankfully, I was strong enough to protect myself, but it was still exhausting. Sometimes she'd grab my keys, wallet, or phone charger and storm out, or she'd break small things around the house in anger. The next day, she'd always apologize and act sweet again. For a while, that cycle of chaos and calm kept me stuck. I knew something was deeply wrong, but part of me still wanted to believe things could go back to how they were in the beginning. The worst story started one night when I was asleep. I had to be up for work at 7 the next morning. Around 2 a.m., she came home from drinking with friends and brought one of them along. She asked if I could drive her friend home because she'd had too much to drink. They'd even driven past the friend's house to reach mine. I agreed and took her friend home. When I got back, my girlfriend was passed out on the sofa. I tried to help her to bed, supporting her because she was still wearing heels. When we finally got to my room, she pushed me away, insisting she could walk on her own. On her first step, she tripped and fell into a pile of laundry. I couldn't help but laugh at the timing of her drunkenness. She immediately started yelling and hitting me. I grabbed her wrists to stop her from swinging at me and pushed her back onto the bed to calm things down. I didn't realize that a kitchen knife she'd recently received as a gift was sitting on the bedside table. She suddenly picked it up and came toward me, shouting. Panicking, I ran out of the room and tried to keep distance between us. She kept coming at me, screaming, and I barely managed to move out of the way before she stumbled into the sofa behind me. Thankfully, she wasn't hurt, but the whole scene terrified me. I ran into my room, locked the door, and listened as she pounded on it and yelled for nearly 20 minutes before finally passing out. It was about 3 in the morning, and I had work in just a few hours. I left her in the hallway while I got ready, then helped her to bed before heading out. When I came home later that day, she was in the kitchen cooking, cheerful as if nothing had happened. She had completely blacked out and didn't remember a thing. She apologized again and again, saying she couldn't believe what she'd done and promising it would never happen again. To her credit, it didn't. After that night, we kept all the sharp objects in the kitchen where they belonged, and things stayed calm for a while. I'd like to say I eventually stood up for myself and made her leave, but that's not how it went. She eventually left me after 2 years and is doing the same crazy behaviors to some other unfortunate guy. Story 3. I was engaged to my high school sweetheart while I was in college. Everyone told me I was crazy, that I needed to experience more before settling down, but I was convinced I had found the one. She was a band geek, and I was a football player. I was a stocky white guy. She was a slender Asian girl. During our first year apart at different colleges, she began making some questionable choices. She would go out to clubs and dance with random guys, only to confess weeks later out of guilt. She lied about where she was going more than once and eventually cheated on me while drunk on a family cruise that summer. She said it all happened because she wasn't sure if she loved me. Despite everything, I forgave her. Fast forward 2 years, she transferred to my college to finish her bachelor's degree. We lived together for that year before she left again for pharmacy school. During that time, I began to sense a growing distance between us, though I didn't fully understand it then. After she left, the dynamic shifted even more. She grew suspicious and began accusing me of cheating, despite having no reason to doubt me. I visited her almost every other week, often spending money meant for food just to see her, while she rarely made the trip to visit me. She also started keeping detailed records of who paid for what, tracking every expense with precision. Her behavior left me feeling uneasy and hurt, especially as her accusations of infidelity became more frequent. One weekend, I visited her while we were hanging out with my best friend, his wife, and 2 college friends. She spent nearly the entire night talking to one of his friends, ignoring me completely. When I pulled her aside to confront her, she became furious and disappeared for more than 20 minutes. When she finally returned, she gave me the silent treatment until we got back to her place, where she broke down crying and accused me of being an asshole for saying something. The next morning, I left without even getting a proper goodbye from someone I'd been with for nearly a third of my life. About a week later, she texted me saying she couldn't do it anymore. I didn't respond. Instead, I left class and drove down to see her. When she opened the door, she didn't speak for almost an hour before finally taking off her ring and handing it to me. She said she still loved me, but that being with me hurt too much. After hours of crying and asking questions she wouldn't answer, I left feeling confused and betrayed. She even accused me of cheating. 2 weeks later, I learned the truth. The same night she ended things, she spent the night with the guy from the dinner I mentioned earlier. My best friend saw her go into his room and later confirmed they'd been hooking up for months. All the suspicion she'd directed at me had really been her own guilt for cheating. There is much more to the story, but it hurts too much to recount. Story 4. A taxing ordeal began with what seemed like a harmless plan. My ex and I had arranged a trip to Europe while we were still together. There hadn't been a major fallout between us, but by the end, I realized my romantic feelings had faded. I eventually told him, and we agreed to give it another month to see if it was just a phase. It wasn't, and we ended things amicably. Since we moved in the same social and hobby circles, we kept a friendly rapport. He insisted we still go on the trip, and though I was hesitant, he reassured me it would be fine. I agreed, but made one thing clear. He shouldn't expect me to spend every moment by his side. I wanted space to explore on my own. He said that was perfect and eagerly began planning his own itinerary. The first night arrived, and things unraveled quickly. He deliberately made himself vomit several times in our shared bathroom, a ploy to draw my sympathy and attention. When that failed, he threatened to harm me. When even that didn't work, he abruptly announced he would be leaving the next morning, leaving me solely responsible for the hotel and remaining trip expenses, which I couldn't afford. To make matters worse, I was in a foreign country for the first time, completely alone. Terrified, anxious, and overwhelmed. I spent the entire day on the phone with my dad, crying as I tried to explain what had happened, while Verizon literally laughed when we asked for a break on the international call costs. Eventually, I had no choice but to buy an emergency flight home. His mother lied to the airline on his behalf, claiming he was sick, which prevented them from changing his ticket. My flight wasn't free. I ended up paying nearly 4 digits to get home, on Christmas Eve no less. Afterward, he harassed me relentlessly over roughly $160 he claimed I owed him for my half of the hotel cancellation fee. I replied, "Sure, right after you reimburse me for my flight home." In hindsight, I could have just paid him and ended the tension, but perfection was never my companion. His response only escalated. He enlisted friends to harass me online, target my friends, hack my private accounts, and publicly leak information to smear my name. When that failed to intimidate me, he began driving 4 hours to my town, parking near my workplace, and lurking by my car at the university until I finished class. Somehow, he learned my schedule, and wherever I went, his car wasn't far behind. By that point, I stopped leaving the house altogether. My GPA dropped from a 3.88 to a 1.93, and I lost all my grants. My school didn't care at all. In an effort to cope, I created a new private account that I believed was completely secure, a place where I poured out my darkest thoughts. I wrote about wanting to end it all, about how the one thing I cherished most, my education, had been ripped away from me, and how I no longer had the drive to even get out of bed. I detailed my emotions, my struggles, and my growing reliance on drugs and alcohol just to make it through each day. Somehow, he found it. I still don't know how, but he made everything public, broadcasting my posts to our shared hobby group, where thousands of people knew my name through my involvement and leadership. The humiliation and betrayal were suffocating. Yet, ironically, his actions ended up saving me. The backlash fell harder on him than on me, and among those who saw what happened was a lawyer who reached out and offered his services completely free of charge. One cease and desist order later, my ex finally backed off for good, leaving me with an unexpected sense of justice and relief. Even now, years later, I remain deeply wary of traveling with another man. Every time I step into a new place or meet someone new, I can't help but glance over my shoulder, remembering the chaos and relentless harassment that once nearly consumed me. It's a shadow that lingers, a constant reminder of how far I've come and how careful I still must be. Story 5. While not as extreme as some accounts, this story was profoundly toxic and serves as a warning. If you ever find yourself in a similar situation, the safest thing you can do is remove yourself immediately. My ex-girlfriend, whom I dated for just over a year, had severe bipolar disorder. I stayed with her despite knowing this because I genuinely believed she could manage it. The relationship was split evenly between good and bad, 50-50. We shared incredible moments together, and the first half of our relationship was filled with deep connection and intimacy. But it was as if a switch could flip in her without warning. I couldn't express an opinion that differed from hers without triggering a blow-up. For instance, when I said I was uncomfortable with her spending time with an addict friend, she completely lost control. Over time, even the smallest disagreements would set her off. About 6 months in, she moved into my apartment. She left dishes piled in the sink, clothes scattered everywhere, and a general mess that never seemed to end. When I asked her gently to clean up after herself, I tried to stay calm, knowing how volatile she could be. But she'd explode, screaming about unrelated things, calling me names, crying out of nowhere, then jumping right back into yelling. I have countless stories like this, times when I was at work and she would call over 30 times in a single shift. The chaos never stopped. She once confided that when she was 15, she had taken pills. Her father rushed her to the hospital to have her stomach pumped, and she was placed under psychiatric evaluation, where she was diagnosed with severe mood disorder. I also suspected she had mild schizophrenic tendencies. She often tried to connect with the paranormal, practiced lucid dreaming, and was intensely paranoid. She believed psychiatrists were frauds who drugged people for profit rather than helping them, slowly ending them, as she put it. I have my own critiques of the medical industry, but she was a clear example of someone who desperately needed professional help. Occasionally, she'd have lucid moments acknowledging her outbursts, admitting she had a problem, and saying she should seek treatment. Yet by the next day, she'd accuse me of manipulating her into thinking she was crazy, insisting everything was my fault. After we broke up, she told everyone I had been gaslighting her throughout the entire relationship. I was her longest relationship, and I truly believed I could help her, but the truth is, you can't help someone who doesn't want to help themselves. Now, I've been with a woman I love deeply for nearly 5 years. We have minor arguments, as every couple does, but our life together is overwhelmingly happy. I'll admit, I still glance at my ex's YouTube videos from time to time, not out of longing, but out of hope that she's finally getting the help she needs. I don't blame her. I blame the illness and the toxicity that came with it. Story 6. I met this guy online when I was around 16 or 17. Since I've always been shy in real life and preferred staying at home, avoiding social situations, we talked endlessly every single day, texting, messaging, and playing games together for hours. We would fall asleep on Skype together, and I felt an unusual closeness to him. I was enrolled in an online school for my last 2 years of high school, so I was almost always home, making it easy to talk to him constantly. He had a job that allowed him to respond almost all the time. Everything seemed normal at first, at least to me. Over time, we grew very close, and I thought we had fallen in love. He suggested we meet in person. He lived in Canada, and I lived in California, so it was a big deal. He flew out to see me, and we went on a proper date, dinner, shopping, and a movie, and it all felt magical. He visited me a total of 7 times over the course of a year, usually for weekends, sometimes staying for a week or more. The excitement of seeing him each time felt like a dream I could barely believe. As we spent more time together, I began noticing he was controlling and very demanding. Young me excused it as needy behavior and thought it was a sign of love, so I ignored my doubts. Eventually, I graduated and traveled with my mom to the Midwest to visit my very ill grandmother. While there, my boyfriend started pressuring me to tell my parents about him and to get a passport as soon as possible, insisting I visit him immediately when I turned 18. I told him I was still trying to find a way to tell my mom, and that I had already told her I wanted to get a passport, but I just needed her to take me to the passport agency. All of this was happening while my grandmother was gravely ill, mind you. He pressured me to do everything immediately, like it were an emergency. As my grandmother's health declined further, my mom decided she wanted to move back to the Midwest to be close to family, and I really wanted to go with her. I had never been fond of California, and was ready to move as soon as she was. My boyfriend, however, decided that wasn't going to happen because he disliked my mom. He insisted I would live with my dad because he liked him and knew my father, despite knowing that my relationship with my dad was terrible due to other unfortunate circumstances. I sobbed the entire drive back to California with my mom because I didn't want to leave her. She told me that the situation was insane and that I should just go with her, warning me not to trust my dad. I hugged her as tightly as I could before leaving. My family has never been particularly touchy-feely, so that hug remains vivid in my memory. It was the last one for a long time. I stayed in California and began attending college 3 times a week. My dad lived in a trailer park, which was a little rough, and we were always broke, but I really enjoyed college, so I stayed focused. I lost contact with my mom, probably because I was terrified she was disappointed in me. Then I got a call from my mom telling me that my grandmother had passed away. She asked me to come to the funeral and said she would pay for my ticket. I was terrified she hated me, so I didn't go. That decision has haunted me. It is honestly the biggest regret of my life. It destroyed me emotionally and I sank into severe depression. Eventually, I broke up with my boyfriend. My energy and will to live felt completely drained, leaving me in a hollow state. My boyfriend did not handle the breakup well. He demanded we get back together. I repeatedly told him no and asked him to leave me alone. He kept calling without stopping. Eventually, he flew out to see me. When the Border Patrol called me to confirm travel plans, I told them I had not arranged to meet him and that I did not want him near me. They turned him away. I am still terrified thinking about what could have happened if they had allowed him in without checking with me. During this period, I made many personal mistakes due to my depression and the unstable home environment. My dad and I were eventually evicted from the trailer park and we started sleeping in hotel rooms. My ex and my dad were still close, so my ex paid for a few motel nights, but I mostly slept in my car. I spent a lot of time at a local land center with friends, just hanging out. I am still grateful to those friends. I never went a day without appreciating them. Some additional personal events occurred, and my dad and I had a falling out that ended in him striking me. I left and stayed with some friends for safety. My ex learned about this and invited me to Canada to stay with him. I was hopelessly lost at this point. Homeless, broke, and alone, far from my mom. I eventually agreed and flew to Canada. My ex convinced me to get back together through manipulation. I lived with him, his dad, and his brother for about a year. We fought often because he was awful. He treated me like a live-in servant. He had lost his job and was home constantly. He demanded intimacy constantly, insisting I cook and clean to earn my keep. I felt completely trapped and scared. Eventually, I visited my mom after finally reaching out, and she convinced me to leave him and come home. I did, and a huge weight was lifted from my shoulders. However, there was a problem. He had my very expensive gaming computer. He said he would return it if I flew back to Canada for a weekend because he didn't want to ship it. I reluctantly agreed. He booked a flight for me with no return because he was convinced he would win me back. When I arrived, everything seemed normal at first. We went back to the hotel, and he forced me to withdraw all the money from my bank account, threatening me. He took me to our room and showed me an engagement ring. He said we were going to get married and move to the States. I told him he was freaking crazy. He forced me to wear the ring, took an overwhelming number of pictures, and sent them to all my friends as proof. He took my phone, which I could only use on Wi-Fi, and then demanded intimacy. I told him no, making it clear the relationship was over. He said, and I am not exaggerating, "Well, can we at least shower together one last time?" I told him to screw off and went downstairs. He physically tried to keep me in the room. Finally, he said, "Okay, fine. If you don't want me, then fine. We'll book you a flight, but your computer is at my mom's house," which was about 15 minutes away. We took a cab, and as we arrived, he confessed it was not there. I jumped out of the cab and immediately started walking toward other people for safety. I threw a massive, well-placed temper tantrum, screaming and crying, desperately demanding to go home. A man called the police for me, and I am so grateful to him, a trucker in Calgary near Starbucks, for stepping in and helping. The police arrived, asked for my ID, and listened to what was happening. This manipulative person had stolen my passport. The officer demanded that he return my phone and ordered him to leave. I was taken to a women's shelter, where I stayed for several nights and contacted my mom. She bought a flight for me to return home, and my ex eventually shipped my computer as an apology. I stopped leaving the house altogether. Fear and anxiety became constant companions, and I never allowed anyone to control me that way again. Story 7. I got into my first relationship when I was 18. I'd always been painfully shy growing up and had never even kissed anyone before. I met Alec through my best friend Ella. I could tell right away that he liked me, and I was flattered. No one had ever shown that kind of interest in me before. Ella warned me not to get too close to him because he had some issues. But what 18-year-old ever listens to love advice? He asked me out, and just 2 days later, my best friend of 11 years, Lily, passed away unexpectedly. I was devastated and felt like a part of me had disappeared. On the day she died, Lily was supposed to come over to my house after school. She didn't get along with Alec and asked if he would be there. When I told her yes, she decided not to come. I've carried guilt about that choice ever since, even 8 years later. Summer had just started, and to help me cope with the pain, Alec introduced me to things that helped me escape reality for a while. I tried to fill the gaping wound her sudden loss left in my heart with unhealthy habits. My sister had moved out, and my mom was working 2 jobs at the time. She didn't want me to be alone, so she gave Alec permission to come over whenever he wanted. She meant well, but that decision ended up being a mistake. He quickly took over my space and took advantage of the situation. Alec constantly brought friends over, left the house in chaos, and used up our food without asking. I was too numb and too grateful to feel like I belonged, to care. My belongings often went missing, but Alec convinced me I was just being forgetful. Somehow, he always had money even though he didn't have a job. I didn't realize the truth until much later, even though deep down, I knew something wasn't right. About 2 weeks into our relationship, a group of Alec's friends came over while my mom was at work. The conversation took an uncomfortable turn when they started asking personal questions about my relationship with him. I told them the truth, that I hadn't been intimate with anyone before. Instead of respecting that, they mocked me and said I was being unfair to Alec. Their comments made me feel ashamed and pressured. Alec didn't defend me. Instead, he joined in. Eventually, after constant pressure, I gave in. Even though I didn't really want to, it was something I regretted immediately. Not long after, Alec brought me a kitten, Muffin. At first, I thought it was a sweet gesture, but it quickly became clear he wasn't kind to animals. He treated Muffin terribly, and by the end of our relationship, the poor cat was terrified of men. Seeing that broke my heart. Still, I remember one moment that almost felt like justice. Muffin once jumped down from the top of the fridge and scratched Alec's face and back before darting away. I couldn't help but laugh through my tears. Sometimes, I would wake up to Alec crossing serious boundaries. I tried to push him away, but he wouldn't stop, insisting I owed him affection. Whenever I resisted, he would guilt-trip me or call me names until I gave in. I was emotionally exhausted, and after a while it felt easier to stay quiet than to deal with the arguments and manipulation that followed. He also never respected my boundaries about protection, and looking back, I realized how lucky I was not to face serious consequences. Later, a friend told me Alec had hoped I would get pregnant so I could never leave him. For a while, Alec got involved in risky and illegal activities. When something went wrong and he lost money, he panicked, afraid of what might happen. I ended up paying off the debt myself, even though it wasn't my responsibility. I never saw the money again. That experience taught me just how deep I'd fallen into his chaos and how far he was willing to go to protect himself, even at my expense. At one point, I decided to sell my laptop. Alec told me that a family member of his wanted to buy it for $200 and offered to handle the sale. Later, when I asked for the money, he said he had already spent it, claiming I had given it to him as thanks for taking care of me. Alec constantly manipulated me emotionally. He told me that if I ever left him, he would hurt himself. He said I was the only good thing in his life and that anyone who hurt me would pay for it. Every time we argued, he used those threats to pull me back in. Because I was still grieving Lily's death, I forgave him again and again, convinced I could somehow save him. Eventually, his threats extended to Muffin. He said he would hurt my cat if I ever tried to leave. I thought about leaving so many times, but fear and guilt always stopped me. One day, while we were in the car with one of his friends, Alec made a terrifying joke about what he'd do if he ever got into trouble, and I didn't help him. He thought it was funny, but I was frozen with fear. I remember nodding along and saying I'd help him, even though I didn't have the means, just to keep the peace. Ella had been begging me for months to leave him. Alec had slowly pushed everyone positive out of my life and replaced them with people who only brought chaos. I tried to break up with him several times, but every time I did, he threatened to hurt himself. After 8 long months, I finally found the courage to end it for good. He begged me to take him back, but I stood my ground, showed him the door, and told him not to come back. Even now, I still deal with the emotional aftermath. For years, I struggled with trust and intimacy, terrified of being hurt again. I didn't date anyone for 3 years after Alec, but for the past 5 years, I've been with someone who truly respects and cares for me. He knows parts of what I went through, and he's been incredibly patient and kind, helping me heal in ways I never thought possible. And I still have Muffin. He's come a long way since those early days. He's no longer as scared, and he's turned into the sweetest, most affectionate cat I've ever known. Sometimes it breaks my heart to think about how much gentler his start in life could have been, but I'm grateful that he's safe now. I did my best to protect him back then, and even though I still carry some guilt, I remind myself that we both survived, and that's what matters most. Story 8. I have a couple of experiences, but I'll mention the worst one. 5 years ago today, I made a mistake that changed my life. Thankfully, the cam community I found later helped me recover from many of the consequences that could have come from that decision. The day after I turned 16, I met an 18-year-old guy and we started dating. Within just 4 months, he moved in with my family and me. At first, things seemed fine, even exciting, but over time, he started to change. His behavior became controlling and emotionally abusive, and sometimes even aggressive. I felt trapped, not physically, but mentally. He convinced me that nobody else would ever want me, that I was lucky he had chosen me. I tolerated his cheating, the secrecy around his phone, and the way he constantly went through mine, criticizing me for things I hadn't even done. Little by little, my friends drifted away. They were frustrated that I kept choosing him over them, but I didn't see the situation clearly back then. I was manipulated, naive, and too inexperienced to recognize how toxic it all was. My whole family told me to leave him and find someone better, but I was too naive to understand how right they were. After about 3 years together and living under the same roof for almost the entire time, I realized I needed to find my own way forward. I didn't have a car and I lived too far from town to walk to work, so I started looking for online jobs. That's when I discovered webcam modeling. At first, I was hesitant. I'd always been the quiet, rule-following type, the teacher's pet, the nerdy girl who never partied or got into trouble. I had never even snuck out or done anything rebellious. Webcam modeling became my secret, something I didn't share with anyone. It was difficult to explain where the extra money came from, so I made excuses, and in some ways, I still do. But the truth is, the online community I found there helped me rebuild my confidence. For the first time in years, people were kind to me, supportive, and made me feel seen. Their words helped me find value in myself again. It might sound strange, but that experience empowered me to believe that I was worth more than how I had been treated. That growing sense of empowerment eventually gave me the strength to leave an abusive relationship I never should have been in. When I tried to end things, my ex became manipulative and tried to control how I left. He demanded that I call my mom and confess things I wasn't ready to share, even though he had once supported the very choices he was now using against me. After I refused, he kicked me out of the apartment I had paid for and took half of my paycheck without my knowledge. For 3 days, I stayed in the city with nowhere to go, sleeping on benches outside stores and trying to figure out what to do next. I cried a lot. I blamed myself for everything because that's what he had conditioned me to do. Eventually, I went back. I had no other options. I was 1,000 miles from my family, had no close friends nearby, and didn't have the money to get home. I begged him to let me back into the apartment just so I could have a safe place to sleep. He used guilt and emotional manipulation to pull me back in, convincing me that he couldn't live without me. At the time, I believed him. Our relationship was already falling apart when one final argument changed everything. During that fight, he kicked me out of the apartment while I was barely dressed. Right after I'd taken a shower, I fought my way back inside to grab the essentials, my phone, wallet, and glasses, but he made me leave with nothing else. As I was walking out, he smashed my phone against the wall and hit me. That was my breaking point. I decided I was done for good, no matter what it took. I was 19, with no phone, no money, and no way to contact anyone for help. My credit cards were maxed out, and my bank account was empty. I had the clothes on my back and little else. Then something incredible happened. A regular viewer from the online community I had worked with reached out to help. He sent me enough money for a plane ticket, a train ride to the airport, and even some extra for food. Without his kindness, I don't know where I would be today. I was scared he wasn't flying me home, but instead offered a safe place to stay. In my fear and desperation, I asked if I could go to him instead. My ex had told my mom terrible things about me, calling me names and spreading lies, even telling her things about my personal life that weren't true. I knew she didn't approve of certain parts of what he said, and I was terrified she wouldn't want me back because of it. At that moment, I felt completely worthless and alone. So I made a choice. I flew out to meet a man I had never met in person before, the one who had helped me escape by sending money for rent and groceries when I had nothing. Everyone warned me it was a huge risk, and they were probably right. But I was trapped between two bad options: going back to an abusive situation or taking a chance at something new. I decided I would rather risk the unknown than continue living in fear. My life turned out better than I ever could have imagined. I'm alive, safe, and healing. The man who helped me escape never hurt me. He's actually my boyfriend now, and he's been patient and kind through everything. He's helped me rebuild myself piece by piece. I still have some of the habits that survivors often develop. I apologize too much, and sometimes I flinch if someone moves too quickly near me. But I'm learning to trust again. I know he would never hurt me, and that trust is something I never thought I'd feel again. I owe so much to the online community that helped me see my worth. The people I met there reminded me that I wasn't weak for what I'd been through, I was strong for surviving it. They helped me realize that I didn't deserve the pain I endured and that I could move forward. To everyone who encouraged me, supported me, and helped me find my confidence again, thank you. You gave me back my sense of power and reminded me that healing is possible. And to my boyfriend, thank you for showing me what real love and safety feel like. Story 9. I once lived with a girlfriend for nearly 8 months after being together for almost a year. During that time, I rescued a cat that had been stuck in a tree. From that day forward, I took care of her completely, buying her food, paying for vet visits, and making sure she had everything she needed. She was my cat, not ours, though my ex had one of her own that she absolutely adored. My cat was calm, independent, and somehow became my little source of peace in a very chaotic home. When I finally decided to end the relationship, things got out of control. What should have been a simple breakup turned into a 9-hour ordeal. Her mother even skipped work to stay there, and my ex kept making emotional threats that left me terrified and trapped. I wanted to walk out, but when I tried, she slammed the door hard enough that I ended up limping, unable to move fast enough to get away without them following me. They told me they would come after me if I tried to leave. Over the next few days, while I slowly packed up my things, I told her I just needed a few extra days to prepare my cat's new living space. She agreed, at least, that's what I thought. When I returned to pick up my cat, I was met with flashing lights and confusion. My ex and her parents had called the police, claiming ownership of my cat because they were the landlords who had allowed me to keep her. I showed every receipt, every vet bill, and the adoption papers proving she was mine. The officers were sympathetic but explained that they couldn't enter the house to retrieve her. They advised me to take the matter to court and apologized before leaving. The very next week, I filed a lawsuit. The court process dragged on for months. During that time, I reached out to my ex, begging her to return my cat peacefully. She refused, claiming it wasn't her decision, that her parents were the ones keeping her. But eventually, she admitted that she had told them to stop me from getting my cat back. That was my breaking point. In that moment, I realized it was never truly about the cat. It was about control. It was about holding on to something just to keep me from moving on. In that moment, I saw how far obsession could go when someone couldn't handle losing power. In a final attempt to avoid going to court, I told her I would stop by her house early in the morning, around 7:30, and that if she didn't want to see me, I would leave quietly. I just wanted the chance to talk. When I arrived, she let me inside. For about 30 minutes, she spoke in a way that was all over the place, saying that breaking up with her was the best thing that had ever happened to her, then suddenly claiming she would do anything to win me back. She tried to use affection as leverage, but I refused. All I wanted was my cat, who she had locked upstairs. Eventually, she said I could see her for a moment. I told her calmly that if she let me hold my cat, I would leave immediately and peacefully. She hesitated, trying once more to use the situation to manipulate me, but I pretended to agree just to get close to my cat. While she was upstairs, I quietly placed the carrier by the door. The moment she brought my cat down, I gently took her, secured her in the carrier, and made for the exit. As I was leaving, my ex ran after me into the street, yelling, but I didn't look back. I got in my car and drove away, shaking but relieved. For the first time in a long while, I was free and my cat was safe. A struggle broke out as I shouted, "Don't hurt her." My ex fought desperately for the carrier, trying to stop me from taking my cat. Her mother rushed outside after seeing the chaos and joined in. I had to pull her mother's hands away to protect my cat and keep her safe. Afterward, I was flooded with messages and calls, claims that the police were after me, that they were waiting at my house, and even at my friends' homes. Then came messages saying my ex was threatening to hurt herself, and even her mother told me I'd have to live with the guilt. That was the moment I realized just how far the manipulation went. When I finally called the police, they confirmed none of it was true. No one was after me. No one had filed anything. That truth gave me the relief I needed. I decided to drop the lawsuit. I didn't want to reopen the chaos or face them again. I had my cat back, and that was all that mattered. She was safe. I was free. And for the first time in a long time, I felt peace. I had carefully recorded everything. My conversations with the police, the chaotic confrontation at the door, all of it was saved on my phone. Every document I had proved, without a doubt, that my cat legally belonged to me. Those recordings and papers became my peace of mind, my protection, and my proof that I had done nothing wrong. Just a week later, I received a court summons. The family was demanding $10,000 from me. I immediately met with my lawyer, gathered all my evidence, and learned they didn't have a real case. Honestly, they were lucky I chose not to press any charges of my own, because I easily could have. What I'm sharing here is only a small part of what happened. They made things incredibly difficult for me and my loved ones, crossing lines that no one ever should. Thankfully, the law in my state is clear about protecting people from this kind of situation, especially when it involves personal property. When the first court hearing finally arrived, her father showed up. The look on his face said it all. He hadn't expected me to come prepared. At the second hearing, he didn't even show up. In court, he tried to tell a completely different story, claiming that he had paid for my cat himself, but that contradicted everything he'd told the police earlier, and I had the recordings to prove it. They were very lucky not to end up back in court. Later, her mother even sent me messages asking for monthly updates on my cat, as if she still had any right to know about her. I chose not to respond. That entire nightmare is now behind me. My cat is finally happy and free. She had always been uncomfortable around my ex, who used to hold her too tightly even when she tried to get away. But now, she's relaxed, affectionate, and at peace. She curls up beside me every night, purring like she knows she's home for good. In the end, the story is simple. I ended a toxic relationship. My ex took my cat and later tried to sue me for $10,000 after I got her back. But I stood my ground, proved the truth, and won. Not just the case, but my freedom and peace of mind. Story 10. She was not psychologically unstable, but consistently deceitful and manipulative. She often threatened to hurt herself if I tried to leave and kept pushing me to move in with her. The truth was, her living space was extremely unclean, and I couldn't handle being there full time. Then she demanded that I start paying half her living expenses, claiming I was there half the time, even though that wasn't really the case. Her main source of income seemed to be applying for assistance programs and asking me for money. I helped her fix her car and laptop and even paid to get her started in 2 small business ideas, spending about $1,800 in total. I asked her to sign an IOU because money was tight for me back then. From the beginning, I had been honest that I didn't want children. I even got a vasectomy for peace of mind. As time went on, our relationship became distant, our intimacy faded, and she often said she was too stressed or just not interested. After 2 months of this, I decided to end things. She showed up at my workplace, crying and making threats, repeating the same emotional manipulation I'd heard before. I tried to stay calm and offered to talk things through privately. She seemed to agree, but I already knew the relationship had reached its end. 2 months later, nothing had changed. She was still struggling financially, and I tried to find a way to reconnect in exchange for $100, hoping it might ease the tension between us, but it only made things worse. The guilt and constant arguments that followed dragged on for another couple of months. She was miserable, and no matter what I did, spending more time or giving her space, it was never enough. Eventually, I told her it was over for good. She showed up at my workplace again, crying and refusing to leave. When I insisted she go, she suddenly claimed I had hurt her, trying once again to make me feel responsible for her pain. Then she switched tactics and pleaded with me to stay together. I was exhausted, emotionally drained, and gave in. Later, I learned that she mainly wanted my help fixing her computer. I repaired her laptop and recovered the data, but curiosity got the better of me. While looking through some files, I found messages and notes that suggested she'd been involved with someone else just weeks earlier. When I confronted her, she looked me straight in the eye and insisted someone else had written them. Looking back, that was the point when I should have walked away for good, but I let it go. A week later, I noticed toys sitting in her bathroom sink. She offered an excuse, but I didn't believe her. Over the next few visits to her place, I quietly collected everything of value that still belonged to me. Finally, I texted her and said I didn't believe her anymore, that I didn't love her, and that it was truly over. I told her not to come to my place because I wouldn't be there. I was heading to my parents' house upstate for a week. I added that if she refused to respect my boundaries, I would seek a restraining order. She tried to convince me to stop by and pick up the rest of my things, but I'd already taken everything that mattered. I turned off my phone, packed my bags, and left town free for the first time in far too long. When I came back a few days later, things were calm. My phone was full of missed calls and messages, but that was it. I was finally free. Unlike my first breakup, which had been heartbreaking, this one brought nothing but relief. I tried to collect on the IOU by sending a certified letter giving her the legal amount of time to repay. It was returned, so I sent another to her grandmother's address, the only other one I had. She called, refusing to pay, saying she'd only signed it because she had no choice. I reminded her that I could take her to small claims court if needed, but honestly, my life had improved so much since ending things that I realized the money didn't matter anymore. $1,800 was a small price to pay for peace and freedom from someone who had drained so much more than my wallet. Not long after, I found out that she had reached out to my first ex, who's now a good friend of mine, just to talk about me. During that conversation, she admitted that she'd been unfaithful for the last 8 months and had used me for whatever she could get. Today, my life looks completely different. I have a great job, I'm financially stable, and I'm even saving to buy a house. I've picked up a few hobbies and enjoy the peace that comes with independence. As for her, last I heard, she was living back in upstate New York with her mom. She wasn't crazy, just dishonest and manipulative. Ending that relationship was messy, but it was the best decision I ever made. In the end, it set me free. Story 11. I dated a master manipulator. She lied from the very beginning. I first discovered she was cheating when I found out she'd been involved with her boss. That was just the start, the first crack in the carefully crafted facade that slowly revealed who she really was. Not long after, I learned she was addicted to painkillers. I had to miss work one day to pick her up after she suffered a seizure at her job. Eventually, I found out she'd taken a random pill she'd found. Her excuse was that she had miscarried and couldn't cope, though she had never been pregnant. The situation only got worse from there. I also found out she was involved with my neighbor, random people from the internet, a 55-year-old sugar daddy, and even an ex-con. She often started intense arguments and even lashed out when she didn't get her way. I learned to step away when things got out of control, but she'd always find ways to pull me back in. Then came the financial betrayal. She opened credit accounts in my name without permission and maxed them out, leaving me buried in debt of $10,000. The final breaking point came when I finally tried to distance myself. She forced her way into my home, caused damage, and tried to take my dogs. When I called the police, things escalated quickly, and she ended up facing consequences for her actions. Eventually, I was able to set legal boundaries to protect myself. Later, I heard she married someone from her past, and not long after, the debt she'd left me with was unexpectedly cleared. For clarity, I did find out that the story about the miscarriage wasn't true. Thankfully, my dogs, Jerry and Reggie, were never harmed. They're still happily curled up at the foot of my bed, waiting for their meals every morning. She also left behind 2 cats she'd insisted on keeping. They hadn't been properly cared for and soon had kittens. Around that time, she moved in just far enough away to avoid the no-contact order, ironically, with the same neighbor she'd been involved with. Before leaving, she claimed she'd found homes for the kittens, but later I learned most of them hadn't been rehomed responsibly. Some ended up wandering the neighborhood, scared and alone, before animal services eventually stepped in to help. To make matters worse, some of the neighbors blamed me for the situation, even though I did everything I could to fix the mess she'd left behind. Later, someone suggested that she might have been dealing with personal or mental health challenges. She had been prescribed medication at one point, but never seemed to follow up with professional care. Looking back, I realize I tried to approach the situation with empathy, especially after she told me a story that I later discovered wasn't true. That compassion is probably why I stayed through so much of the chaos for as long as I did. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.